Hey, welcome to an introduction to Maryland History Day, a program of Maryland Humanities. My name's Grace Woodward, and thank you so much for joining me. So maybe you've heard a bit about History Day, maybe not, but this webinar will give a bit of an introduction to and a walkthrough of the program. Hopefully I'll be able to answer some questions, give some helpful guidelines, and up some excitement about the Maryland History Day program. In addition, if you have a pen or a pencil, maybe a piece of paper, maybe notes on your computer, if you have a spot to take notes, that could be helpful. I'll be asking some prompts, giving some time to take notes. So if you have that ability, getting that ready right now would be excellent. Awesome. Okay, let's get into it. So on to the big idea, right? What is History Day? History Day is a program where students will participate in long-term research projects that will end in creative presentations. So these projects, I really like to think about long-term. So what exactly does long-term mean, right? It means that students are going to be working with these projects for a couple of months at the very least. So projects will be starting in classrooms in the fall semester in September or October and continuing into December, into January. And then if students choose to be in competitions, they can even go all the way to June, which is when we have our National History Day competition. So I always like to stress this concept of long-term with students because I really want to remind students that this project is something you have to be interested in. Really think about what are you going to want to keep learning about for months, right? We think about History Day as being really student-driven. That means students can decide what they want to learn and how they want to learn about it, and then how they want to share that information with others. So really think about your topic and think about what you want to continue to think about and continue to learn about for the next couple of months. Okay, so we're talking about these long-term creative presentations, right? We're talking about this long-term research project and it's going to ultimately end in this creative presentation. And what can these creative presentations look like? So for History Day, we have 5 formats: a research paper, performance, documentary, exhibit, and website. And in those 5 formats, students can work either individually or as a group of up to 5 students. And each format's going to fit projects a little differently, right? If I have a project that has a lot of photographs, a lot of video available, I might lean toward a documentary or a website. If I have a project that's a little bit heavier on information, maybe there aren't as many visual sources, I might go for a research paper or performance. Another thing I like to think about is what's a student's interest. So are you interested in writing? Are you interested in journalism? Maybe the research paper is a great choice for you. Are you interested in acting and prop building and script writing? Maybe performance is going to be the right choice. Thinking about not just is our topic interesting, but also is the format interesting to us. Same thing with documentaries. Documentaries are really fun because a lot of us have seen documentaries, right? You might have watched documentaries online, you might have rented them, but you're familiar with documentary format. So that can be a really great option as well. So you can use those things you've seen in documentaries you've enjoyed and incorporate them into your History Day project. Another option that we can see in the example I've got here on the left is the exhibit. So exhibits might be a new word, but you also might recognize it from museums, right? So an exhibit, it's like a mini museum. So I like to think about this kind of being a really creative and visual and artistic presentation of the information. So on the left, we can see a History Day project that was about the history of climbing Mount Everest. And we can see how the student chose to portray the mountain and portray the Tibetan flags. They've done a really great job of organizing their information by color. You can see the different sections of their project have different color in the background. And we can also see this red line, right? And this red line does a great job of representing 2 things. It represents both the story that carries through the paper, or through the project, excuse me. At the same time, it represents the path that people were using to climb up Everest. So we're seeing this kind of creative presentation of information, and that's really what exhibit is strongest at. And then in addition, students are able to do a website if they choose. Websites are really fun. It's a really excellent skill to develop. I know when I was younger in middle school, high school, I didn't really have that much experience building websites, but I think now it's becoming so much more of a critical skill, and students can really use their own creativity, right? Deciding where they want to put images, where they want to include colors, how they want to organize and segment their information into a website kind of format. So another thing that the History Day offers is, right, we've got the projects. So I just talked about what those creative presentations can look like, what those projects will look like for classrooms, for students building those projects. But another thing that History Day offers is a competition. And so I don't like to think of competition as like the end all be all of history. The real important part of History Day is working on those projects and making really creative projects. But competition can be a really fun way to get involved in the project, to get more interested in the project. So take a second, think about the kinds of competitions you've been in. Maybe it's sports, maybe it's art, maybe it's a spelling bee. So think about those competitions you've been a part in. And now think about what kind of feelings have you had about those competitions. Maybe this is a time to use that notepad, write down some ideas. What are some feelings you've had about being in competitions? Maybe you said nervous, maybe excited, maybe competitive. I had a student a couple weeks ago tell me that competition made them feel checked in. And that's exactly what History Day competitions can do. So I love that kind of terminology, right? Checked in. Competition can make us feel really interested in what we're doing. It can make us especially excited. It can make us feel checked in. So in History Day, competition kind of happens in stages. You'll first have your school competition, and from your school competition, students will advance to district competitions in February and March. And then from district competitions, about 700 students across Maryland will move on to our state contest. This year, our state contest is going to be held on May 1st in 2021. And then those 700 students will compete in the state contest to advance to the national contest. About 60 students from Maryland will go on to compete in the National History Day contest against about 2,800 students from across the country. Those are going to be in June of 2021, right? Connecting back to the idea of long term. But we're really seeing the concept, the way that History Day can be really competitive. It can be really engaged, and it can be really fun at any level of competition. Okay, and as competitions entail, right, there's a kind of judging happening. So like with many competitions, we have judges at History Day at every single level. And History Day judges are volunteers in the history field in our communities, historians doing work in our communities. So we've got historians and teachers and librarians, museum professionals, all these different kinds of folks will come and be History Day judges. So it's also, competitions for History Day can be an excellent opportunity for students to share their projects with their community, share this information they've learned with the community around them. Judges will review these projects and choose projects to advance, and then also provide feedback for future improvement. So between those levels of competition I just spoke about, students who are going forward to the next level are able to change and edit their presentation to reflect judges' feedback to improve their projects, almost like how you'd practice before a big game if you were playing a sport, right? Okay, so I showed you the exhibit example, but I want to go through a couple more examples. I've given you kind of a simple outline of getting started on History Day, a timeline of what the competition looks like. And before getting into more details, I want to make sure to present some examples, some concepts of what History Day can look like and what a History Day project might look like. So as I'm showing these examples, if you've got a piece of paper or something to take notes on, just jot down some of the things you're thinking about these projects. Are the things they do really well? What makes these projects a good example? Are they well organized? Are they well edited? Is there anything you don't like? Are there things you would have done differently? So the first one I'm going to start with is an individual performance from an 8th grader. So it's a middle school project. And she did a performance about Loving versus Virginia. Loving versus Virginia was a really important Supreme Court case in the United States that announced that men and women of different races could marry each other. So right as the title of her performance says, it's an important stepping stone for equality in America. So I'm going to show us this, and then we can collect some of our thoughts.
Hi, my name is Addie Skillman, and this is Loving versus Virginia, the stepping stone for equality in America. We never wanted to make a scene. We never wanted to be deemed civil rights pioneers or challenge the Constitution just for the fun or the fame of it. But we never wanted this tragedy to come to life for us. No, in fact, that's the thing we least wanted. See, my wife, Mildred Jeter, and I had been good friends since the time I was 17 and she was 11. Both of our families had lived in Caroline County, Virginia for generations. So when Mildred turned 18 and got pregnant, we decided to get married. Now, little did we know how hard it would be just to get a working marriage license and some time alone. Even more, I don't think anyone at the time realized how important our situation would become to millions of Americans of all different races and genders who just wanted to be accepted for loving who they love. Now, the year was 1958. At the time, laws banning interracial marriages, or anti-miscegenation laws, had been in place for nearly 3 centuries. By the law, I was considered a white man and Mildred a colored woman. I knew we couldn't get married in our home state of Virginia because of the anti-miscegenation laws that had been in place there since 1691. So we drove to Washington, D.C. to get a marriage license. No anti-miscegenation laws were in place there. We were happily married in D.C. and ready to begin a life together. We moved back to Virginia to live with my parents, but our joy lasted none than a month. And the
Okay, so take a little bit of time, think about what you felt was well done about that performance. Maybe take a couple notes, maybe just think in your head, but what really worked for you in that performance? And I'll give you just a little bit of time to think about that. Okay, great. Thanks so much. So now another example is a website here. So this website is about the unintended consequences of Brown versus Board. So we can see how these students have done an excellent job breaking up their text, giving an introduction, and sharing their thesis. They've done a great job including images. We can see how they've given us buttons to go through the different parts of their presentation. They've pulled out quotes, they've included images, but also they've included other kinds of multimedia, right? There's some opportunities for folks to listen to the website. So take another second, think about some of the things that are well done. Did you like the design choices? Do you like the colors they've chosen? What are some things that you think are well done in their presentation and what are in their website? And what are some things that you would do differently? Great, thanks. Okay, and now I'm going to show you guys a documentary. This documentary is about the health regulations that were created around smoking. And then we're going to go into this documentary and we're going to take some more notes about what we enjoy in this documentary.
None of the things which have been found in tobacco smoke are at concentrations which can be considered harmful.
But the components themselves can be considered harmful, can they not?
Anything can be considered harmful. Applesauce is harmful if you get too much of it.
I don't think many people are dying from applesauce.
They're not eating that much.
A lit cigarette is a burning paper tube filled with crushed tobacco laced with addictive nicotine. The cancer-causing smoke, inhaled deeply into the smoker's lungs, leaves a layer of tar behind. Today, more than 1 out of 5 deaths in the United States is tied to smoking. How did this ever seem like a good idea? This is the story of how the work of a committee of 10 men started a war on tobacco, an industry that was quietly poisoning a nation.
Excellent. So again, before I go back to the presentation, just take a second. What are some things that you really enjoyed about that documentary? What worked well about that documentary? Okay, excellent. Thanks for checking out those examples with me. I hope they gave you some inspiration. I hope they helped you figure out some things that you think can go well about History Day projects. All right, so each year History Day has an overarching theme. These themes are broad and flexible, but History Day projects must clearly connect to them. This year's theme is Communication in History, the Key to Understanding. You can see the little graphic up in the right-hand corner. So I'm really excited about this theme. I'm really enjoying this theme because it feels so relatable to so many parts of history. For example, in the photo on the left, you can see a pretty well-known Marylander. You might recognize him already, but that's Frederick Douglass, a famous abolitionist who did a lot of work to end slavery in the United States. And behind him is a copy of the North Star. You can see that newspaper title. And the North Star was a newspaper that Frederick Douglass started and wrote for and edited. And I think the North Star is such an excellent example of how communication really connects to Frederick Douglass. Frederick Douglass's writing was an important part of his work to end slavery. He used his writing to tell people about the horrors of slavery and fight for abolition. But it wasn't the only way he communicated, right? That's one way we can connect Frederick Douglass to communication. But we could also connect him to communication because of his influence as a great speaker. It's also known as a great orator. He was an excellent speech giver and gave many impactful speeches across the country. So we can highlight the importance of his public speaking to abolition. We can highlight this importance of communication on a lot of different levels to Frederick Douglass's impact on history. So thinking about this Frederick Douglass connection, what are some other topics you can think of? I'm going to give you guys about 30 seconds, brainstorm some topics, write them down, talk about them in class. Just take a little bit of time to brainstorm some other topics. Other topics that are about history, that are interesting to you and are related to communication. Cool. Keep thinking. Maybe you've written down one or two, but try to get another couple down as well. Great. Thanks so much for brainstorming with me. So maybe you thought of some things like American Sign Language or the invention of the telephone, or maybe you thought of Rosa Parks' bus boycotts or Martin Luther King Jr.'s speeches. All those are great starting points, right? And there's tons of topics. You could brainstorm topics related to communication forever. But so after we've brainstormed these topics, right, you might be thinking about something you're really interested in, but we really want to narrow that down, right? It's important that we're getting this topic to a place where we can really center our research and focus our questions onto something really specific. So for example, let's return to that Frederick Douglass concept, right? So I'm starting with this bigger theme, this year's theme, which is communication in history, the key to understanding. And I'm saying, I'm generally interested in Black history. I want to talk about the Black American experience in the United States. So I'm going to say, okay, so I know I want to do that, and I'm going to think about a certain, but it's still too broad, right? There's so much in that interest. So I'm going to go a little bit narrower. I'm going to say, what's a topic in Black history that I'm interested in talking about? So I might be interested in talking about abolition. I want to think about the process of abolition, the process of ending slavery in the United States. And from there, I'm going to go even narrower. I'm going to think, is there a certain person or a place or an event that means a lot to me that I want to read about in terms of abolition? And I'm going to say, you know what? I'm really interested in learning more about Frederick Douglass. And not just Frederick Douglass, but also specifically the North Star newspaper that he was involved in. So to find that topic, I might have had to do more research to narrow that topic down to that point. But I've thought about this funnel until I've gotten to what feels like a more tackleable topic. And I can use that topic to think about some research questions. So an example for this project would be, how did Douglass and other abolitionists communicate their message in the North Star? How did people respond? So that's talking about Frederick Douglass, it's talking about the North Star, and it's also talking about communication, right? It's tying back to that theme. So if you're struggling to think of topics, or if you're interested in a topic but you're not sure how to start with research, we have these things online called ThinkPort inquiry kits. And the inquiry kits are a really excellent way to get thinking about History Day projects and get started with research. So I'm going to walk you through one right now. So here's our ThinkPort Teaching with Primary Sources website. It's our homepage for Teaching with Primary Sources with Maryland History Day. And I'm going to say we're going to go to these inquiry kits that I just mentioned. And we have a lot of different inquiry kits for social studies. We've got ones for elementary school students. We've got ones for US history and world history and government. But I'm going to look at the US history kits today. You can see all these different eras we offer kits about. I'm going to zoom into this era, United States in a time of crisis between 1929 and 1945. And I'm going to look at topic 6, the golden age of radio. So in our inquiry kits, we've got some thinking questions to help guide some of your understanding of this topic. We've got a series of primary sources from the time period. We have some photos, and we also have an audio clip, a recording of an episode from one of the longest running radio programs at the time. And there's also a secondary source, and that secondary source is going to help us learn a little bit more about the context to these primary sources. But once I get here, right, this is some information, but it's still not enough to make up a whole project. But I can go to these sources and I can figure out where these sources are from. So this is from the Library of Congress, a really excellent place to find primary sources. And let's say I've looked at this topic and I thought, you know, I want to know more about women and radio in the 40s. So I'm going to research women, radio, and 1940s. And let's see what I come up with. The Library of Congress is a really huge search engine. There's going to be a ton of results. So we also always want to think about how we can narrow our results a little bit, right? There's a lot going on right here. There's blogs, there's research guides. But let's say I only want to look at photos and prints. So I'm going to click the photo, prints, and drawings. And there we go. We've got a little bit more specificity in our results. Great, so as you can see, the ThinkPort inquiry kits give us some great opportunities to look into more topics, to get both topic ideas and get some help in those first stages of research. Additionally, we've got some helpful History Day resources on our website. You can find resources from National History Day like the rule book and the theme book that give even more details about some of the things I've chatted about this presentation today. They give more details about the formats, the competition rules, and this year's themes. You can also find more sample projects from previous years and topic brainstorms from local historians about this year's theme. As you move forward in your projects and research, there are also more resources for research, finding sources, making citations, writing, and more. And finally, here's the contact information for the History Day team. Thank you so much for joining me today and tuning into this webinar. Have a great one.